welcome to Inside View. I am your host, Joel Metzger. Joining me on the show today is Pastor David Kinney. He's with the First Baptist Church in Angels Camp. Pastor, welcome.
Thank you, Joel. Good to be with you again.
It's glad to have you back on the show. We had a very intriguing conversation about the Muslim faith and some of the impacts that those beliefs have had on the world, and talked about ISIS and some other things. And we're going to revisit some of those because it's been about a year since we've talked, and a lot has changed since then, and it continues to be a changing landscape. But I also wanted to let people know that you're going to be leading a very exciting tour coming up, and let's just tell people about that right off the bat.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Joel, very much. February 9 through the 16th, 2016, I'm leading a tour with a couple other pastors in the area to Israel, and it's going to be an amazing trip. We obviously see all of the great sites. We go to the Dead Sea, we go to Masada, we go to the Sea of Galilee, to Nazareth. We go over to the Mediterranean Sea and see an amazing amount of locations. Obviously, we go to the tomb. We go to the place where historically it's understood that he rose from the dead, the cave system. We go to Bethlehem to be able to see the cave system too, where Christ was born. And it's just an amazing trip through Jerusalem. And what's exciting about this particular trip is that we're going to be outreaching to the Palestinians in the city of Jericho. Most people know that Jericho is the place where the walls came down with Joshua. Well, once we see that as a part of our tour, then we're going to spend several hours, hopefully about 3 hours, at a school, and we're going to be passing out tennis shoes. We're collecting tennis shoes for this outreach, and we're going to do a little medical clinic for them too. People in Jericho are very poor. Most of the Palestinian cities within the West Bank are very, very poor. And so it's going to be a very exciting tour. So I'd love to just invite anyone that would like to come along with us.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, you've been to Israel a number of times. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. What is it like to go back after having seen it and then visit it again?
You know, there's so much archaeological discovery taking place that I was there just 2 years ago. And it's like every time I go back, there's something new that they've uncovered that just continues to bring the Bible alive to us.
Tell me, what is important about the relationship that the United States has with Israel and their position in the world, and why is that so vital to the U.S. or not vital? What's your opinion on that?
I think it has been vital because, number one, there's a Bible blessing that for the country or for the people that blesses Israel, God promises to bless that country, number one. Number two, since the founding of this nation, if you go all the way back to George Washington, they found that as a very important part of the blessings on this country. You can read their writings. You can actually do a little bit of research in regards to some of the really major founding fathers and how they found that so important to support Israel even in the 18th century. Even to this day, we are certainly probably the very best friend to Israel, and we've supported them greatly. And so there are great benefits for us as America to be a great supporter of Israel.
Do you think that it's worth billions of dollars a year going over there? Is that financial support important, or is it more of a political support and more of a vocal support that's important to you?
I think it's both.
Okay.
Yeah, the money is obviously important because we are supporting them. Even though Israel is a very, very wealthy country as far as their economy, their unemployment rate is very low. The technology that is taking place in Israel, the expansion of businesses is unbelievable. Not only that, but most people don't realize that, but in just the last 5 years, oil has been found. Natural gas has been found in Israel, which is actually making now Israel a superpower when it comes to energy in the Middle East. That's never happened before.
We're going to talk about Iran and a deal that was recently signed and the impacts of that. But before we get there, I just wanted to let people know kind of your background and why you're so interested in these topics and your experience along these lines. So bring us up to speed on your background.
Sure. Several years ago, I did a series on Islam, the invasion of Islam. And that was the title of it. And when I did it, I had a knock on my door, and it was a young man, a young Arab man, and he, for several minutes after he introduced himself, to try to convince me why I should not bring this series to my congregation. In fact, I felt very intimidated by him, and I felt very insecure for a few moments there until I kind of got things together in my mind and realized that, okay, I need to stand my ground here. And it was quite striking to me, because it was even to the point where he promised that he and his father, who was a leading cleric in the largest mosque in Turlock, that they would be in our services. And if they didn't like what I was going to say about the Quran, about the Prophet Muhammad, or Allah, that they would protest us. And you just never know today what protesting can do. Mm. So after about a 3-hour conversation with this student from Colombia, which he informed me has a very large Muslim population, as a matter of fact, and growing, he did. Then they did come, and it was quite an amazing day. Nothing bad happened, but I was on pins and needles a little bit, but I didn't change and alter my sermon series. It can be found on our website even, and but it was an important time. This is in a little tiny town of Angels Camp. I could understand if this was in Sacramento or Stockton or Modesto, but in a tiny town like this. But it was something that woke me up to really understand. I really need to know what's going on. Number one, because it's I think the largest religion in the world now. I think it's surpassed Christianity at about 1.5 billion followers. Christianity is about 1.4 billion followers, and Islam is growing so fast. And it's growing so fast, not just in the Middle East, but it's growing so fast in Europe, and it's growing very fast in Canada, and it's just now spreading into America.
And what do you think the repercussions of that religion growing so fast will be?
Well, right now, the growth seems to be connected to the radical end of Islam, to the terrorist groups that are taking over large parts of the world now. And if you check out some of the mosques in Canada even, and some of the teachings that are coming forth from their pulpits, from their clerics, from their mullahs, it's very, very scary and very alarming, because these particular groups do not like what America is all about. They do not like the freedom that we have and many other aspects. So it's a real problem. A real problem.
What would you say that are the most concerning of the teachings that you've become familiar with that are coming out of these establishments?
Yeah, it's the radicalism of how they're taking Muhammad and communicating Muhammad in a very unique way. They're communicating him in a 7th century backdrop. And why is that important? Because what Muhammad said in the 7th century was exactly what ISIS is communicating today. And now I bring that up because many of these radical groups that are in parts of the world right now are not affiliated with ISIS, but they have the same viewpoint, the 7th century viewpoint and message that Muhammad had. And that's frightening for us.
And what was that message?
No, that message is that if you're not a Muslim, if you're not a follower of Allah, then either you convert, you pay a tax to be able to exist, you could lose your job, or death. That's real. Those are real things that are going on around our country today. And ISIS has brought this to light because of obviously what so many people have seen in the news over the last year and a half.
So with was it 1.6 billion?
About 1.5.
1.5 billion Muslims, are we seeing those cultures that are run by people of that faith, are you seeing these 7th century ideas being implemented, as in, are we seeing taxes being paid, or people being killed, or losing their jobs?
Great question. Yes. It's called Sharia law. Sharia law is a big part of a Muslim community. It usurps any other law. That takes authority over any other law that has been established by the county or by the city or by the state or the country. That's how seriously they see it. Sharia law, you go by the Quran and only by the Quran and or its interpretation. And to deviate from that is not a good thing.
So where are we seeing Sharia law practiced in today's world?
In parts of Europe, for sure. We have jurisdictions of France, Germany, England, the Netherlands. If you go to parts of Canada now, you're finding that they're taking over certain sections and they're establishing Sharia law. And it's the same law that they have in Iraq or Iran or in Saudi Arabia, for sure, or even Syria. So these are real issues that we're now having to grapple with.
So that's interesting because all of those areas are still, viewed as either democracies or kind of modern societies. So, so within the modern society and system of government, there are pockets where Sharia law has been implemented. How does the larger country and county and government feel about that type of activity?
Most of them don't like it very well, and it's creating real tension between the country or the city or the county and these large growing populations of Muslims throughout particularly the Middle East, particularly the Europe. Now, why is that so important? Because if you look at the population growth of Muslims compared to any other group in Europe, let's just say Europe right now, they are outpopulating the Europeans. And so many believe, I've read many reports in regards to the takeover of these countries that I just mentioned within 25 to 30, maybe 35 years, based on population explosion.
So that's kind of the long potential impact here down the road is if you had enough population who believed
absolutely.
in that way, you might see governments change, you might see Sharia law implemented in an entire area. Now, for those who don't believe that that should happen, I mean, do you really think that that's realistic, first of all? Because, I mean, a lot of people now would say, you're crazy, Pastor.
I know.
There's no way that this is going to happen, especially in some place like Canada or the U.S. or Europe. What would you tell someone who just says, you're absolutely crazy?
Yeah. Well, go to parts of Michigan as we speak, and you can actually find some great struggles taking place in Dearborn, Michigan, one of the largest populations of Muslims in the United States of America. And there is great debate and real struggle. There are other small pockets of this already starting to happen within other cities in the United States where they're trying to establish what is called Sharia law. And that just simply means, Sharia means law in Arabic. And so it just means the law. And it's the law that's connected to Muhammad and Muhammad's interpretation or his complete understanding of what we call the Quran.
Okay, so if you're correct and this continues to spread and that is the end game, what would the impact globally be 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road?
Globally, I think it would have a major shift in how we would see the world because of simply the growth, the population of Muslims in these major portions of the world. Now, culturally, when you get the radicals that come in, and most of the people that want to set up Sharia law are radical. They're radical. They're 7th century Muslims, thinking that they can go back to that. So that's creating great tension. And so I don't see how we can get away with it because, again, it's happening too fast. If you listen to some of, here's a great example, Russia. There is a huge migration of Muslims to Russia. Do you know that right now, half of their military is Muslim? If you were to listen to Prime Minister Merkel of Germany, she has stated that by 2035, Germany will be a Muslim state if something doesn't change in the growth of radical Islam in these portions of the world.
So you mentioned radical Islam, and I know that even our president, President Obama, is he's hesitant to say even the words radicalized Islam or Islamic terrorists. He doesn't like to use those in the same sentence. And he must have his reasons, and I don't know if he has necessarily come out and explained why he won't use those words, but it seems like there's a reason for that. What would you say, why wouldn't our president want to use those words in the same sentence?
You know, Joel, I don't have an answer to that question, because I don't know, and I think that has baffled so many people in America, from congressmen to governors to religious leaders, Christian leaders, why he will not label them as a radical Muslim terrorist group, ISIS or any other that's connected with them. I don't know.
Don't know the answer.
I don't.
I know that some have theorized that maybe the president and others believe that there are a small number of people who are Muslims, but they are extremists. They are not representative of the larger group who, by and large, live in peace, respect the customs of the culture or society that they live within, but they don't actually go and kill people or try to set up Sharia law, and that to put this small group up on a pedestal would actually be giving them more credit and exposure than they deserve, and yet when the mainstay Muslim is not causing these issues. Do you think that there's a big gap between these extremists and folks who are Muslims who really do just kind of want to exist in a peaceful manner?
Here's a great example to answer that question. If there's 1.5 billion Muslims in the world today, it is estimated that those that are radical, those that are very dangerous, those that have that ISIS mentality, or as I've said many times now, the 7th century mentality of Islam, is roughly about 700 million people. Now that's huge, because that means that within Islam, you have a growing part that is very dangerous and growing faster. The point is, this group over here is growing faster than the what we would say maybe the peaceful Muslims. That's scary.
Where did that 700 million come from?
Yeah, from particularly Joel Rosenberg, who is a historian. He's written several novels and history books on Jewish and Arab relations, and he's a real scholar in this area.
Okay.
It's pretty fascinating what he says about this.
Speaking of ISIS, you just mentioned them recently. We would both agree that they are certainly associated with the Muslim faith, and yet they're radicalized and doing some very terrible things. And we hear about them in the news all the time. But it doesn't seem like we necessarily hear all of what it is that they're doing, and we may have our media being selective in what they show us. I know that you cover this closely and you're well read on it. What's really going on over there, and what is ISIS doing?
Number one, they are spreading faster than we ever believed they could, and that's for many reasons. I think number one is because they have created such terror in the area, such demonic activity within their behavior, that it has just flat out just made these people afraid to be able to stand up. You hear about the Iraqi army just collapsing once the ISIS groups start to come in, and that's a real problem. If you look at how they're spreading now, you know, they just started in a little portion of Syria, and then a small portion of Iraq. Well, now, Joel, I can tell you that they are taking more cities that are getting closer and closer to Baghdad. And I specifically remember talking with you last time, and I made the prediction that they will take Baghdad one day. They will. Do you realize Mosul is only about 70 miles from Baghdad? Wow. And they have taken that city. And then if you look at where they're moving south, Yemen, they're creating tremendous tension in Yemen. Why has Saudi Arabia now decided to bomb? Because ISIS has come so close to them. Now you move up into Syria, which they're taking more of Syria. The rebels up there are not able to fight very well. They're not being funded by us or any other groups, so they're pretty much collapsing. And ISIS seems to just continue to grow. Then, if you move just a little bit over to the west, you find Lebanon, which now is is having problems with ISIS and skirmishes breaking out, and group pockets of ISIS that are now taking over sections, and it's growing very fast. Then you go over to North Africa, Libya. They're taking over Libya. Pakistan, they're getting a foot in Pakistan. They're trying to get into Afghanistan. You name it, they're going to go there.
Some of the videos that we've seen over the last year have been horrifying, and this is coming from a culture that has seen just about everything in our films and our TV and everything, and yet what ISIS has put out is beyond belief for many of us who seem so used to this type of thing. What on earth is causing them to burn people alive in cages or cut someone's head off on live television and all of these horrible things? What is driving that type of behavior?
Joel, I'm sorry to say this, but the reason this is happening, the way they're behaving, is because this is exactly how Muhammad behaved during his crusades. And he did the same things. Mass killings, mass burials, cutting the head off. You know, if you don't convert to Islam, or at least their brand of Islam, you're finished. They're mimicking their leader, Joel. That's exactly what they're doing.
So this is all condoned within the text and the guidance itself?
Exactly right. And I'll say this, and I think I can say it pretty sure, that most Muslims do not know their own Quran.
So these words are in there, but they're not being adhered to by most Muslims.
They're not being adhered, or they're being reinterpreted. And the Quran is not designed to be reinterpreted. It is a matter-of-fact writing.
Got it. Who is ISIS targeting? Are they targeting Christians? Are they targeting Shia, Sunni? Are they targeting their own neighbors? Who are they really going after?
All the above. Yeah, all of the above. Christians seem to be a big part of their target. Obviously, we've seen this in the news, the beheadings, the crucifying of Christians, taking their homes, spray painting the Arabic letter N on the buildings, or on a home, which means that Christian is associated with the Nazarene. And so the letter N makes them stand out. And the letter N in Arabic is a U. It's kind of a little hook with a U with a little dot on the top, and that's the Arabic N. And so they will spray paint that on a Christian's home, which means that you have about 24 hours to either convert, pay the taxes, leave, or die.
So they will take money from you if you want to remain in that area under their control and not be killed. They'll take a tax from you?
Exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right.
What are ISIS's main funding sources at this point?
Oil. Oil has been a big part of their funding. If there was no oil in the Middle East going back 100 years ago, they wouldn't be where they're at today. But then you have the drop in price of oil. Now we're just a little over $40 a barrel on a price of gas, price of oil barrel, and we're seeing that this is creating some problem. So they're having to sell things. They're having to be a little bit more creative. Not only that, but they have bank accounts that they have seized, and there are billions of dollars that most experts are sure that they have access to that money along with the oil fields.
What do you think should be done to address ISIS?
Yeah. Well, bombing them is not working, if you've noticed. Drones don't seem to be getting the job done very well. This has grown to be such a problem for the United States of America. Mainly, and I say us because we seem to be the ones that lead all the attacks. We do have some help from Saudi Arabia, as I mentioned, and some of the other countries that are doing a bombing here and there, but we're doing most of it. And it's not really working. They're spreading like wildfire still, which has surprised even the Pentagon and the State Department, and even, I think even our president too. But what is to be done? If I knew exactly what to do, I'd write a book on that. Because it is such a huge topic. We have messed up the Middle East tremendously over the last 35, 40 years. And I think it started with the Shah of Iran. When he fell and the Ayatollah came in, and the Islamic regime, the strong Islamic regime came in, we messed up everything. And we have never gotten Iran right since then. And they're a big part of this over the last 35, 40 years. And so we're not getting anything right in the Middle East. And I think we need to really, really address some major issues economically, politically, religiously, in order to be able to get to chipping away at some of the problem there. But you realize there's such an unemployment problem in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, one of the richest countries in the world, do you know what their unemployment rate is? 40%. Wow. Now, you can't find a job, so this radical group says, come fight with me, a bunch of 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, living off of testosterone and being promised that if they die, that they will go to heaven or to some form of heaven, and 70 virgins are waiting for them. Well, all that looks pretty inviting when you can't even feed your family or get a job.
Just a couple minutes left. I wanted to get your thoughts on the Iran negotiations and a deal with them. Do you support that deal or do you not support it? At
this moment, I do not support it for several reasons. Number one, the verifying, going in and verifying what Iran is or is not doing. Now it's understood that it's not even going to be outside people like the UN or other countries that are going to be verifying these sites that are connected with nuclear activity. It's their own people. I really can't handle that. Number two, we're going to give them, as soon as this is ratified, and if you ask me if it's going to be, I think it's going to be. Mm-hmm. We're going to give them, I believe it's about $150 billion if we haven't already given to them. Now think about this. The size of their economy, if you were to put that into their economy, that would be like putting $2 trillion into the American economy. So you can't tell me that's a good thing, because they're radical, they're dangerous, they're a terrorist organization within them, and they want power, and they want more arms and more weapons, and I know that's going to go to that.
So you're very concerned about that, no doubt, and yet it looks like it's going to go through. So next time we have you on, we'll have to touch base and circle back and see what the implications of that will be. We are out of time tonight. Again, thank you for your insights on the Middle East and Muslims and what might happen down the road, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Joel.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.